Good morning.
Morning.
So I'll tell you a bit about myself. I've actually found there's a great way of saying it. I put mangoes on the blockchain. So I did a project with the World Bank in Haiti, working with smallholder farmers and being able to track and trace all the way from the mountains with a farmer who doesn't really have a phone to the consumer in the US. And this is really about data to understand viability and really looking at value chain and getting the money back to them. So this is something which is a journey, and it's really made me understand that we need to have something which is what we call enterprise grade. And last year I spoke at NFT.NYC to say, let's talk about NFT beyond JPEG and music file. And I'd like to introduce my
So the way we're using eNFTs in our effort, which is called Henessene, because I think we've lived in the age of man, which is the Anthropocene, for an inordinate amount of time, more than we should have spent in it. And now is the time for unity, which is about consensus, collaboration, and coexistence. And the way in which eNFTs applies to us is that we're an enterprise B2B SaaS platform on blockchain, but we're also working on the premise of being environmentally sustainable, which, first of all, yes, proof of work versus proof of stake. We're on a proof of stake blockchain, but is that enough? Because does the ends justify the means? And that's the primary question of everything I've done to date, because it is energy intensive to do anything, right? It doesn't matter whether you're on-chain, off-chain. And the true reason to use anything is to ensure that the outcome of it is not coming at the cost of something that is so egregious that it doesn't make the end effort worth the while. In fact, it would have been better to do nothing at all, especially in the environmental movement. And so when we're creating NFTs utilizing smart contract technology that would allow us to set specific conditions or parameters around the kind of data we're collecting through IoT devices to inform how a certain transaction has occurred on-chain based on off-chain activity, using dynamic NFTs to showcase how that change is occurring over time. What we're essentially trying to do is track change and maintain some level of credibility and honesty in the world of environmental conservation or climate action. Now, of course, a lot of this is just about data being stored in an effective way, in an accessible way, ensuring equity of access to everybody. And it can be falsified. It can come from the wrong devices. It can, there's ways to work around any system. So how do you maintain credibility across the board when human nature tends to be oriented towards doing the wrong thing and getting away with it? And that's the real question of, how do we look at eNFTs being a solution that'll navigate through these choppy waters where we've consistently taken pride in showing up poorly?
So one of the things we were supposed to talk about, we met in Babelsberg. And if we think about the Tower of Babel, it really was about the lack of communication and how things get around. And also, it needs to involve everyone. Obviously, one of the things I'm very happy is about how AI and machine learning is now in this idea of being able to take large sets of data. So you can still, I am absolutely a believer that people do not try to do fraud if they feel that they are getting a fair share or an equitable distribution. So this is why it's important to start from both sides of the coin. I would love to say that if I give a farmer the access to market and also financial services, he's going to be happy, and I'm going to remove that information. And also the other thing is, when we look at this climate action, what people forget, we all talk about, oh, you shouldn't take a plane because it's so much bad for the environment. Guess what? Farming is 25% of green gas emission. So if we can reduce, and transportation is 9. So we have to look at ways on how can we reduce this and what can we do and how do we, we talk about corporate social responsibility. How about getting to the individual social responsibility? So really talking about ESGs.
Beautifully set up for why we are doing CSR on Henessene. I mean, that's the primary purpose of our platform, is to bring credibility to that space. Because in a P2P economy, the beauty of the way we treat corporations in the world is that we give them so much leverage, to behave like a human could, but also behave from a sense of being a collective. So they get to play both sides of the coin as it suits their convenience, both from a legal perspective, but also from the perspective of how they evidence accountability to society and to the environment. And so when we use eNFTs, we force them into a P2P economy where they are, as an individual entity, accountable in real time for the consequences of the choices that they make, which is one of the reasons why we've chosen to partner with brands that are well-known Fortune 500s that are looking to establish themselves with that level of honest, authentic communication, as you mentioned, with the general public, because that's what's needed, given that the markets have shifted. The consumer landscape is now like 81% veering towards wanting value and purpose evidenced by brands in real time. And the other side of this coin is, where you as an entrepreneur can make a difference. For me, my deep passion lies in a sense of true integrity towards the mission. So it's very personal to me to see these brands deliver, because I've consistently worked with them for the last 15 years and seen them fall short of things and not be able to evidence their success and failure states. They've not been able to communicate where they've been able to champion change in a real way. And they've not known how to build on one another's efforts. And so one of the things that we are ensuring is that there is a sense of consensus and collaboration that can occur through data informing where that's needed. If we don't even understand where the blind spots and white spaces are, how do we capitalize on it such that we're actually doing source level curing as opposed to just symptom alleviation? And that's really where I think having it on blockchain allows for that level of credibility in real time.
And the big part about this is that, we keep talking about data being gold. It is where we can really make it to be gold. And I do believe that we can then really put the price on it. We have seen for the last 75 years where the aid has not been successful. Poverty is worse. Hunger has gotten off the chart. So how do we rebalance our lives, and not only our personal lives, but everybody else on the planet? And that is important. And at the end of the day, brands are people. They are individuals working in those organizations. And we may like to say that they are evil, but at the end of the day, they don't want to be evil. They want to do the right thing. And we have an opportunity to really use that technology, that decentralized technology, to help everyone be accountable and really demonstrate what they are doing or what the failures of what they're doing, and how can we actually adjust. Without taking those steps in, we can continue and we will end up to getting to that Armageddon.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things, right? Like, we want to reduce the number of middlemen playing some sort of insignificant role, but monetizing that role between the delivery of an impact and the enterprise executing on it. And so that's one reason to use this technology. The other one is to ensure the number of calls you're making to data, like servers, right? When do you need to be pulling that data? When is it actually resulting in a change moment that is critical versus people just utilizing data because they can? And there is a level of sort of indulgence and data deluge that occurs because we're so obsessed with being able to make everything intellectual and empirical, but unless it's actually populating information in a manner that can be systematically leveraged towards an outcome, it's pointless. So there's a way to streamline that using the eNFTs, which I really appreciate. The other side of this is, as my own commitment to this, I am ensuring that we don't do offsets. I hate it because it's guns and butter. It is not economically viable. It's not ecologically viable. So we don't do the trading and management of offset programs at all. We're looking at, what is the way in which we can allow companies to look at decarbonization instead of constantly leading into compensatory programs where your one hand is continuing to pollute and you're just buying time. We no longer have time, and it's time we woke up to the realities of the world, because it is finite, it is fragile, and we do not have another clock second to keep continuing down the path that has not served us. So I think, one of the stands we do need to take in this space is to ensure that the way in which our platforms are being utilized does not recreate the exact paradigm we've been a part of. Why are we doing that which we've already done, again, in this new space that is supposed to be utopia, that is about individuals finding democratic expression in a different way, right?
No, definitely. But and I think in a way to put it very simply is that we keep talking about the democratization, but we're then creating systems which are not inclusive. We're also talking jargon which others cannot understand. So what I'm looking at myself is I don't call it a pivot. We have been demonstrating and evidencing what's happening by capturing data. So what we want to do, we don't want to do offset. We want to demonstrate the inset into the offset market. Because what we have to think about, I don't know how much you guys know about climate, but one of the big things in environment is what they're calling scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Scope 3 is the idea of your supply chain. Who are your partners? We all know you can't control your partner. That could be your husband. You can't control that person. So therefore, how do we help each other into getting to that? And how do we reset the clock? And one of my concerns is how do we reset the clock where it is not about the greater north, but also creates opportunity for the greater south. And we really give an opportunity to Africa, to Asia, to Latin America, because they're rich in the resources, but what we're seeing is we're seeing the north go down and pick those up almost for free, almost like the oil. So this is an opportunity, and this is really a call to action to all to become aware of what's going on in climate and get over this idea we're going to digitize as an asset a carbon credit. How can you digitize something that you haven't really evidenced how it got to or it's measured? So we need to, and this is where NFT come in as an opportunity to really create impact by demonstrating what has happened. And this is what I love about art. It really creates the ability for us to think beyond what we are used to.
And adding to that, I don't know how my car does what it does, right? But I can get from point A to point B. I don't know how to fix the first thing under the hood if I had to. But that's what it should be like to use technology. You should be able to enjoy the privilege it affords you without having to know every square inch of its expression. However, with Web3, despite it being this utopian technology that's supposed to be available to everybody and make everyone's life better, very few people feel like they can be part of the conversation. And that exclusionary mentality needs to shift. The other part in this is that brands are those everyday people. They don't speak this language. You can speak to a department within their entire bureaucratic environment, but as such, if you speak to any one person within a large enterprise, they don't know what to do with eNFTs or any of these things, any of the assets within the space, right? So I think education is a huge part of it. Making it accessible is a huge part of it. And one of the ways I do that is to look at it from the filter of where does this technology even emerge from? It's not come out of thin air. It's not come out from just us thinking about it right now. It's been a part of us since evolution dawned on this planet. Like, the beautiful thing about blockchain is that it is essentially oriented around biomimicry. It's the closest thing to the way in which life organizes itself. And that is distributive, that is decentralized, but also allows for centralization in a way that's efficient. So if we cannot emulate the natural world in the way we evolve our technology and vice versa, and have that sort of dynamic conversation between the two, what we're doing is being restrictive, and we're creating bottlenecks that will result in the next disaster. It's not actually going to resolve where we're at with what is actually happening in the finite tangible world. So I think part of it is like, NFTs, for instance, for me, that's like a tiger. A tiger is an NFT, a living, breathing NFT, because it cannot be replaced. It cannot be bartered for another tiger, and you expect the same expression within that landscape, because every animal behaves differently. It has unique markings. It has unique expression within an ecosystem it finds expression in. We have lacked the sensitivity, the awareness, and the intelligence to acknowledge the beautiful tapestry tapestry of life that we belong to. And unless we realize that we are a part of and not apart from, we're not going to find that expression in our technology. So ultimately, how we are wired within is how the world is without, and so therefore, what we bring about within us is what we bring about outside of us. And for that, we need to fundamentally change how we think. Just having a new technology is not going to be enough to funnel that change through.
Yeah, but also one of the things I want to say, technology doesn't mean that somebody has to be tinkering in it. I like to say, how many of you really look at your bank account on a daily basis? Probably not. When you're expecting something and it's not coming in, you're looking at it. For me, the way I'm actually, and I'd like to say, we're about to go live next week in Tanzania, and 3/4 of those farmers don't have a phone. But we can provide them with something that identifies them. And we live life through trust. We create relationship for trust. So this is really about being able to add data and creating that ledger, that book of information, that book of life. So we need to start taking a step back and saying, how can this technology be used to advance the plight of men or women? How can we educate and give opportunity to others? Because you used a car, I use email. Do we know how it gets there? We just know it gets there. So let's really start thinking back about how can we use information, provide people with opportunity toward prosperity and creating a happy life.
Yeah, and we're launching our effort with AB InBev like in literally 2 months. And the primary issue that we've had is looking at how can we make this feel as scalable, mass adoption friendly as possible. And one of the limiting factors with Web3 is that it's not by default engineered that way, and so it becomes expensive when you're trying to scale anything. So to do that the right way has taken a while for this technology to streamline and become more consumer adoptable, more consumer facing. So I think it's also a matter of like challenging the status quo and realizing just because it is one way doesn't mean that you should immediately launch your effort in the way that it has been, because maybe it needs time to grow to catch up to where your vision is at. And so don't be afraid to wait to launch your enterprise or your effort such that it has the integrity that it deserves.
Yeah, so we're getting pulled out the stage.
That's the hook.
Let's give them a big hand.